goes a little something like.
Hello literates, I'm Britt Ryderly and welcome back to Writer's Ambition. For those of you who have been hanging in since episode 1, you a real one. And for those of you who are just finding my humble channel, welcome. We hope you stay a while. So, we are continuing with our series of facts and factors of literature through the genres. We did the ladies last episode and now we're on to the gents. Okay. We did YA, fantasy for women, because I had a real concern about women in that genre. We're going to do contemporary romance for the gents, and let me tell you why. I was in church one Sunday. Preemptive story time. I was in church one Sunday, and the preacher was talking about marriage, and he was saying essentially that wives should call their husbands what they want him to be. So if you want him to clean the kitchen, you know, call him a cleaner of kitchens. If you want him to listen, call him a good listener. If you want the physical to level up, call him your mandingo. I cannot make this up. He said, call him your mandingo. Amen. Okay. So, in the spirit of manifesting what you want, we're going to talk about the positive things that I love to see in contemporary romance in the spirit of calling him your mandingo. Amen. Amen. So, I'm just going to highlight 2 series that I love, and I'm going to talk about why I love these series so much, particularly dealing with the representations of men. So the 2 series are The McLean Brothers by Alexandria House, which I talked about in my episode about Black stories that made me laugh when I was still afraid I could only cry. And then the second one is called The Men of Whiskey Row. The Men of Whiskey Row by D.A. Young. And let me just rock right in because, you know, these videos are sized. What I love in general about both of these series is the fullness of the male characters. We can read characters where, you know, the men are, you know, broken and manipulative and abusive, and sometimes it's really well done and you get a real full picture of why the man is that way. Like, there might be flashbacks to his childhood. 50 Shades of Grey, for example. That's just what came to my mind. Perhaps because you're talking about mandingos, I don't know. But Christian Grey, for example. Like him, love him, like that series, hate that series, whatever. You do get a psychological profile of Christian Grey through that series because it talks about like his childhood and him being abused and, you know, as a child, and then how he, you know, was introduced to sex via his mother's friend. Like, you understand his actions. Even in books where you understand the man's actions and you appreciate the realism of it, I also appreciate books where, like, the men are just dope. And that's it. Like, they're dope because of or in spite of their upbringing. I don't care which one it is. I appreciate dope men in literature and not always presenting broken men, particularly broken Black men over that. So these 2 series, well, they're white men in Whiskey Row. McLean Brothers, they're Black. I just appreciate the fact that these men, white or Black, are well-rounded and just settled. Like, they know what they want. They're devoted. They are kind. They are caring. And they really make commitments to the love interest in the book. Like, they choose. They choose early. They choose well. And they call their partner worthy. Not necessarily like saying that they're worthy, but they treat them as such. And both of the love interests in Men in Whiskey Row and McLean Brothers, they're all Black women. So let me just put this pen down and clap for calling Black women worthy of love. Sans bull. Because another thing that I really like about the men in this book, and really just like the couple representations in this book, but we're talking about the men, so the men, it's not that drama doesn't pop off. The books are not unrealistic where it's like, so he's perfect and she's perfect and everybody's perfect, nothing goes wrong. No, that's not it. a lot, especially, no, not especially, both of them have their own, both of these series have their own type of like drama, and it is a lot, like a lot goes on. The Men in Whiskey Row, there's a lot of like race stuff going on, and like real imminent danger, and McClane brothers, there's, you know, there's stalkers sometimes, like stuff happens, but the commitment from the men, so we're talking about the men, the commitment from the men doesn't change. They're like, wow, that happened, or whoa, this is coming. What are we gonna do? Here's how I would like to protect you. Okay, you don't want that? Well, what are we gonna do? Like, it's a conversation. And yeah, there's some male ego of like, let me protect you, but the women in these series are also strong, and it's like, okay, so that was a nice plan. And yes, or that was a nice plan, here's what we're gonna do to get your life. So either way, like, it just shows men being in healthy relationships and being part of it, not having to be taught how to be in a healthy relationship. I just appreciate that representation of men as not always the bearers of toxic masculinity and the bearers of trauma. That doesn't have to be what it always is. Another thing that I really like about the representations of men is presenting these men as grounded in family and community. There's a lot of extended family in both of these series. There's, well, in McClane brothers, there's a lot of extended family. In Men in Whiskey Row, you sort of get the brothers and then their childhood friends. But in both of those series, you absolutely get a feel of how these brothers fit into their community. And I just appreciate showing men as not just going to work, coming home, being in love, providing, having kids. Like, they have full lives. And I super duper appreciate allowing these men to be full humans and showing how they talk to their friends, how they talk to their brothers. Like, the homosocial relationships between men in these two series, I love. And I just think that we need to put more emphasis and more value on how men talk to other men, how they're vulnerable with each other, how that's okay, and how sometimes it's just salvific. But how they can be brothers together, how they can be friends together, how they can give each other advice, how they can hold each other physically and not be afraid or have to do this either like explicitly or implicitly, have this like moment of like no homo, where they won't get too close because that might mean that we're gay. Like, there's no fear of that. And I really appreciate very deeply the way that Alexandra House and D.A. Young respectively allow their men to be emotionally mature, still in process, but not lacking in the typical ways that we see men as lacking, as they get represented in the wider media as lacking. I really appreciate. Hello, literates. So the segue that was supposed to go at the end of that video when I first recorded it was for Eliza. So we know that her and her motley crew are in work in progress land over on Novel Avenue. So they don't live here no more. What does continue to live here is original content. So rather than sharing 3-minute installments of a speculative fiction serial, I am going to be sharing poetry. So I've written poetry for longer than I've written novel length projects. And so I'm just going to share some of it. Some of them will be real short and some of them will be a little bit longer because I write epic poems sometimes that, you know, have their own storyline to them. So what better offering to start this series of poetic presence, and we can spell presence in a couple of ways because we love words over here and we love a good wordplay situation. So what better poem to start this poetic presence series with than Origin Story, a Mythology. This is a poem that I wrote after reading Zora Neale Hurston's autobiography, which has a lot of things in it that people are like, that is not true. Or like, that's been debated. So after hearing this woman tell her story the way she wants to tell it, I was like, oh snap. And so it was actually in a theater performance studies seminar, and the people, the couple of students that were presenting on it had us write our own, and this poem is what I wrote. And so I love it. I ended up performing it at a open mic night at a local poetry spot, and I will share it now. Note, the grandmother that I dedicated this poem to when I wrote it in 2018 has since passed, but I am even more grateful that I lifted her up while she was still here, and more so now that she is at peace. But I'm happy for her. But you know, every time I hear this poem, I'm just like, oh, to lose one you love. But without further ado, origin story, a mythology.
You're so friendly. Okay, so this, I want to dedicate this poem to my great-grandmother, Betty Miles, who is not dead. And I don't want to wait until she is to appreciate how important her spirit is. Origin story, a mythology. I was born with an omega and the umbilical cord. No alpha, no genesis, and I was so unsure of how to start. It took me a couple times. And I did, because this is not a poem of defeat. Those poems write themselves these days. My fingers move to pen my end in this particular kind of suicide attempt. No, in this poem, I will be born. Once, I was born silent. Before the sound of my voice was ever heard, I'd already decided it was precious when I was born.
I know that's right.
The world did hear my entrance. I shouted and screamed is what I mean already. I did not like being touched without consent when I was born. After that, I spoke mostly for survival, signaling when I needed something, although not always. I was fine doing without. I liked the silence. My parents say, "You really didn't cry a lot. I am proud. Look at me, already shrouding myself in mystery, protecting me, reclaiming my time and my cries." And then part of me feels I was preoccupied, praying with grandmothers and fathers who could not be at my welcome, being coddled and cuddled by past family. Why cry? I already had everything I needed. Then I was born on a stage, kicking and screaming. See, this time I did use my voice, and often this is what I had been saving my voice for. Those times I did not cry, and instead was held by ethereal grandmothers. They saved it for me, cast a spell, turned it into a well. They knew I would need it for later, to create new, unbloody winds for me and mine, to clear the air, to end things. Unmake hate first within myself and then the next person. To destroy nations of hate, death, and destruction. What future for us? It is rupturing before us every day with every black and brown body, fracturing before bombs, big and bullet, like they can do this future thing without any brown folk. Without us black folk. Without us black women. Without us poets. What future without us? None. And this is the beginning of resisting erasure. See, sometimes you gotta make your own alpha. But it takes a community, a congregation, a church like this one. I was born with an omega and the umbilical cord. And that's the part I kept after the cut. That's it in the midst of me to remind myself that I have been born many times for such a time as this.